Scott, welcome to the Awesome Dad Show. How are you?
Good, doing awesome.
Hey, it's the only way to be, brother. I appreciate you coming on the show. We met a couple months ago at Challenge Mania Live. I was really impressed by a few of the things you're doing, both as an entrepreneur and as a father. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the two things I'm juggling every day now. Challenge Mania for me is about 2.5 years old, and my son is about 10 months old. So I've been doing both of them for about 10 months now, but both of them, fairly new for me. So, excited to talk to you about them.
Well, and one of the challenges of both navigating your professional life and your fatherhood life is interruptions. So we were actually scheduled a half hour ago, but something popped up. Why don't you tell this the story of what occurred here before the episode?
It's funny. I currently have a work situation that is, really awesome for a new dad because I get to be around my kid a lot more than I'd imagine someone does if they say have to go to an office, leave at 7 a.m., come back at 7 p.m. or has a commute or something like that. I do the majority of my work from home. For Challenge Mania, I pretty much do 99% of it here. Once a month, I might go away for a work trip when we do the live shows, but the podcast I record here, most of my work calls and emails and stuff like that I send here. I store all of our live show merchandise here, and I kind of go through that here. But currently that's in a one-bedroom apartment in New York City that's getting smaller and smaller by the minute. But what's great about that also sometimes poses an issue because, as you know, a 10-year-old kid, as adorable as it is also a noisemaker. You can't tell him when to stop making noise or when to stop wanting to see daddy or cry or laugh or this or that, which for this podcast probably wouldn't be the worst background noise in the world. But for, you're interviewing CT and in the background you have a crying baby, or God forbid you're interviewing Devin Walker, who apparently has something against crying babies, as his tweet yesterday said. It's not the nicest thing for the listeners. And these listeners are in turn supporting your product and they want the nice, clean audio. So it's one of those things you try when you can to work around it. My wife is great, and she's here a lot and is often, taking Brock to classes or, walking around the neighborhood with him or taking him to a playground or the gym. Sometimes at the daycare, she'll take him there. So she tries to get him out of Dodge as much as possible. The one thing we get into, which is what happened this morning, is when we're on the back end or a front end of a necessary nap. And this morning, he woke up a little bit early. He was up at about 6, so his nap came a little bit earlier. What I thought we had planned was that this interview would happen smack dab in the middle of his nap, which would have been perfect. But what happened was he got up about 10 minutes before. I was like, there's no way if we start this now, there won't at least be the sound of them getting out the door, if not him crying profusely while she tries to change his diaper. So I said, let's push it by 30 minutes. Now they're gone, perfect silence, so we can knock this thing out for you. But yeah, that's the one thing that comes with being a kind of half stay-at-home dad, half home-based entrepreneur.
Well, it's kind of funny that you ran into that issue because I had basically the same exact issue. We're trying to put our son down for a nap. He's 9 months old, about the same age, crying for about 20 minutes straight. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm glad Scott is dealing with the same thing on his side. It's one of the biggest challenges, I think, of working from home and having a young kid. It's very difficult to set boundaries. How important do you think your wife is in helping you and facilitating you and giving you the ability to produce Challenge Mania?
Well, I mean, even before Brock, my wife was invaluable because she would, when we started doing these live shows, she would come and kind of be like a second me as far as kind of running the floor and making sure everything's going well. And she would, oversee the merch stand and stuff like that. And so, she was and she would come on the trips with us. Now she doesn't because she stays back with Brock, but, she was always doing that. She was always listening to podcasts. Sometimes while I was recording them, she'd be in the other room. And before I even posted it, she'd be like, what was that thing you said about this? And, she kind of wanted me to explain it. She'd be like, nah, I think you should cut that out. I don't think that sounds good. And she would give me some added perspective of a lot of things that, truth be told, sometimes you don't know how something comes off, whether it's you saying something or whether it's a joke you put in or something like that. And so, her feedback has been invaluable throughout. And sometimes also after the podcast is already aired, she'll let me know how something sounds or she'll ask for clarification on something. So just like a sounding board and feedback for, through and through from the start. But then obviously when Brock came around, being able to kind of juggle him, it's great for both of us because, as I mentioned, a lot of mothers or fathers might have their spouse gone all day, every day.
Yeah.
I'm here a lot of the time. And although I do sometimes need her to take him away at specific times or handle him at specific times, when I'm done doing that podcast, like I'm here, like when I'm done doing whatever, I'm here. So, I think it works well for both of us. But for me, obviously, like there's no way I could do work from home and have a child here without someone like my wife who really handles him the majority of the time. I'm sure it works out well for her, having me in some capacity and instead of me being gone, but that could honestly be flipped the other way and she could be gone every day. And if she was gone every day, working, which is definitely something that, could be happening down the line, I have no idea how I would be able to kind of, be doing Skype video calls and recording podcasts. The podcast at least is audio, but I've been doing a lot of video interviews, not just with you, but, this week I've been doing a lot of Oscars content for the Prop Network. And also I did the Pat Mayo show. And video is like something, like at least if I'm on the podcast, I can kind of be like, ooh, talking to someone off camera. Hey, what's up? We're in a video. Everything's kind of just plugged in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things where, again, without my wife, Challenge Mania probably wouldn't be where it is to begin with. But then also, since last March when Brock was born, without her, I have no idea what I'd be able to do as far as, Challenge Mania goes. Because one of the beauties of Challenge Mania and the way that we work is that, we're a two-man band. It's me and Derrick. And, Derrick is the talent. He's the one with the experience. He's the one with the connections to a lot of these cast members who come on our podcast, who do our live shows. And he, to be honest with you, is a big part of the brand. A lot of people listen to our podcast originally, not because they go, who is this fast-talking Jewish guy from New York? He sounds like he knows a lot about the challenge. It was, hey, this is the guy I watched on my TV for 15 years, so I think is one of the most, bad butt challengers. I don't know if I want to say the A word on here, out there. That's why they got into the show. That's what Derrick provides. I do literally everything else. From a technical standpoint, from a promoting standpoint, I manage all of our pages from Patreon to Facebook. If you've ever sent us an email or a message, a DM on Facebook or Patreon or anything like that, I do all that. I manage all our sponsorship relationships and everything. So I do all that because I'm sort of a micromanager and I kind of a control freak when it's like kind of my baby, but also not my literal baby, but my business. But also, it helps a business get off the ground if you're not paying 5 people to do things that one person really could do. And sometimes people let ego get in the way and they're like, oh, you know what? I don't want to do that myself. So I'm going to pay someone $150 a day to go to the post office and mail stuff. But no, when you order something from Challenge Mania, unless you get it right from our shop, like after a show, we sell the extra posters. I'm the one going and packaging that up and mailing that to you at the store. So I do a lot of that stuff. Now, granted, you throw a baby in the mix, a literal baby, and it's a lot harder to do all that stuff if you don't have someone like your lovely wife to take them off your hands for a large portion of the day. So yeah, my wife is just, incredible. And a lot of the success of Challenge Mania, especially now, is due almost entirely to her,
Yeah, and that constructive criticism from the wife. It's hard to get constructive criticism, but please believe your wife will always give you the constructive criticism. And I will say that in my experience visiting and going to the Challenge Mania Live, which was a blast, by the way, I had a lot of fun. Just getting up close and personal, meeting people was really cool, is that you definitely provide a lot of value. I was really impressed with the way you worked the room, communicated, got people engaged. As someone who also works from home, one of the biggest challenges I think of running a podcast, like you said, is you're wearing so many different hats, whether it's packaging, interviewing, downloading, editing, and then engaging with people on social media, right? How do you balance, okay, I'm with my kids versus, okay, it's time to engage with my fans on the phone? Because my phone is blowing up all the time. How do you balance that?
Well, it's funny because I think a large portion, especially when you're doing a podcast, especially when you're in a digital medium, but also when you're covering a show that's so based on social media interaction.
Yes.
I think the popularity of the challenge to this day specifically is due to the fact that so many of these cast members are easily reachable on social media. And honestly, I think a lot of the fans, especially the maniacs is what we call them, the real super fans who listen to our show, who come to our shows, they love following these people on social media more so, if not at least as equally as much as watching them perform on these challenges. And this has become a 365-day-a-year thing for them, not necessarily a 365-day-a-year gig because they're not getting paid for every tweet, although some of them are, but every single tweet, every single interaction with another cast member or even a fan is being Mike, you're just being analyzed, on Reddit and in these group chats and this and that. And people live for that stuff. Now, because of that, I've taken pride in the fact that if you write us a nice, and now granted, sometimes I get sucked in, and even if it's not so nice, but if you write us a nice tweet or write me a nice tweet or something like that, I try to at least like it, if not respond, if not retweet it. If you message us on Facebook, I'm responding. I'm trying to answer every single question because sometimes the questions are like, hey, I'm coming with a friend who's under this age, but I'm over this age. Can we sit together? This and that. Or, hey, is this shirt, I know it says double extra large, but will it fit me? I'm more of a triple extra large. All these questions I think could possibly be another customer down the line. It could be losing the t-shirt money. It could be losing the ticket money, which sure, more so it's letting people know, hey, if you reach out to us, we care enough to get back to you. So often I have people say, wow, I didn't expect you to respond. And I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, well, it's flattering that you don't expect me to respond. That's literally all I do all day is try to respond to as many of you guys as I can.
So
the problem is,
do you like schedule a time, Scott? Do you schedule a time of day, or is just like, hey,
my wife is trying to kind of implement that. The problem, what I was going to say is either with having a baby or just in general, when my wife honestly would get a little annoyed by this, is that, so my job is, obviously I'm the host of Challenge Mania. I'm the owner of Challenge Mania, the producer of Challenge Mania, but I'm also our publicist. I'm also our social media manager. So at all times, I'm trying to kind of see what's coming in. Are people bashing the last episode, or do people have questions about it? Sometimes people on social media will give us a really important note like, oh, hey, at a minute 30, the audio cuts out. And I'll go and I'll have to go and change it and put the file back up. And that's stuff that sometimes comes in via a tweet. It's not like I get like a call from our podcast hosting site. That's where that information is coming from. And so I do kind of like to always be checking it, right? The problem is me doing my job also looks exactly like a kid, screwing around on a video game in his car. It also looks like I'm texting my buddy. It also looks like I'm scrolling on social media for Syracuse basketball scores, because that is what I'm doing. It's not like, oh, it looks like it. That is what I'm doing, but that is part of my job. So the problem is, I sometimes use this, and I don't know if this holds up as an argument, but it's like, look, if my job was, I was social media manager for the New York Rangers, and I go in and I go to, 17 Penn Plaza or whatever it is at 8 in the morning. And from 8 in the morning till 6 at night, that's my job, is to scroll through Twitter and respond to Ranger stuffs and whatnot, right? That would be my job. And that's what I would do. And you would never question that. Now you might question if I was doing it 3 in the morning or if I was doing it, earlier than that, whatever, but that's their job. My job doesn't have those like kind of set windows of, hey, you're in from 8 to 6. The problem is the show I cover airs at 9 p.m. on Wednesdays. 9 p.m. on Wednesdays for us is 6 p.m. on Wednesdays in what's it called, in the West Coast. So they're actually at midnight. So there's all these kind of points of when it's like, I try to say, it's like, oh, could you set windows where you respond to stuff? But that's unfortunately just not how social media works. These things take on a life of their own before you can even get ahead of it. Like sometimes I'll go to a movie and I'll come out of a movie, that's 2 hours. And within that 2 hours, someone has said something, 40 people have responded, a cast member's chimed in, and there's already a Reddit thread about the controversy.
Right.
While I was watching Bad Boys 3. And it's like, it just, the stuff happens so quickly that me, again, as a control freak of what I'm running, I want to kind of be on top of it. But I totally get, especially now as a father, but even before that as a husband, how infuriating that is for a companion to have someone always kind of tethered to their phone. I wonder if it's like, will you settle for me always being there if I'm always kind of on my phone? Or would you rather me be like almost never there, but when I'm there, I'm like totally there? Because to me, it's impossible for me to just say like for 2 hours a day, I'm going to answer emails and then I'm back into, dad mode. That 2 hours isn't enough, unfortunately. You really do need, large pockets of the day to correctly do this job. That's why most companies would have a person they're just paying to do this.
Yeah. Well, the lines are completely blurred. Like all the rules are being rewritten. And that's something I really think about when I'm on the phone with my kids, is because kids, if there's one thing I've learned with kids, like again, with my 3.5-year-old, is they need gobs of attention. They need so much attention. And when they're not getting that attention, that's when they tend to act out and lash out and whatnot. And if your head is in the phone, even if it's for the right reasons, it can end up manifesting itself in your kid destroying the living room or something along those lines. So having a strong partner, and I think being cognizant of that, is an important role to take. Something you brought up, Scott, that I think is interesting in what you specifically do at Challenge Mania is the social media engagement with all the cast members of the challenge. And there's a lot of very strong, very interesting personalities. They're very engaged with their audience, which, like you said, is probably why the challenge has been so successful. do you ever feel challenged in that you're being dragged into drama that is maybe weighing you down and you're bringing that home with you? That's something that I've faced in the past. Negativity at work tends to um, kind of pour over into my personal life. Has that been a problem for you, or not so much? You're able to shut that out?
No, look, certainly it has. It happens, as you mentioned, with everything. Before I started doing this, I worked in television production for 10 years, and every single either show or set you work on, or if you work at a company, like I worked at a company for about 3 to 4 years, where there's different dynamics. You always have someone who kind of annoys you or rubs you the wrong way, or someone where you feel like you're doing their work for them, or this and that. And you kind of sometimes bring that stuff home, or like a nasty email will rub you the wrong way, or a meeting didn't go well, or whatever. But this is almost even, it's that on steroids. And it's with the cast members. Sometimes it's cast member based, but a lot of the times what it is more it's never the people, because I always click on these people and they're never someone who follows me, or they never recognize the name. And we have such a great community with our listeners, or our maniacs, that we like to call them, that, they come back to our shows, they message us a lot, and this and that, and you start to remember the same names, or at least Twitter accounts. Some people don't even have their actual name; they have their alias or whatever. There's like a memory recognition. I'm pretty good with names, and I'm pretty good with kind of remembering this person's written to me before. I know who the good ones are, if you will, and I know who the trolls are. And the trolls sometimes do get to me, and because what they do, they begin to treat me like I'm a cast member. And I'll say this: like I'm not a cast member. I wasn't on the show.
You kind of are, though. You're ingrained, right?
Now I kind of am, and that's how people start to treat me. They treat me with the same kind of, you're not a real person, that they treat a lot of the cast members. And look, I really disagree with how they even do that with a lot of the cast members.
Oh yeah.
People kind of assume, it's almost like this thing where we as people, and I'm guilty of this too in some ways, where like if someone has something that you would want, or someone seems to have a lot of things going for them, they're good looking, or they're famous, or they're rich, or this or that you're kind of okay with them having a couple other things not work well, or you're really quick to kind of, knock them down a peg about the thing they said wrong, or the thing that they didn't do correctly, because, hey, guess what? You have all these other things, so you should know when you mess up. Whereas, you go to the deli that just opened, and it's the guy who just started his own business, and they're kind of off, they're starting, and he forgets to give you napkins. Maybe you don't complain, because you're like, you know what, this guy's trying. But if you go to the fancy restaurant and you get the bad service and this and that, and you look around, you're like, this place does $1 million a night probably, you're going to complain, hey, this isn't enough caviar. And I think the mistake people make is they do the math where, hey, that person's on my TV. I could take them down a peg or two. But these, to be honest with you, a lot of these cast members, they are people and look, not even just them, but all people who are on TV are some form of person, even if they are rich and successful. But a lot of these people live similar lives to the people that are tweeting on these nasty things all the time. A lot of them go back to very humble jobs at restaurants and gyms and all this stuff that they're just like you. But for some reason, people say, oh, they're on my TV. I can talk to them the way I would never talk to a peer. I would never talk to someone in my real life like this, especially when you're hiding behind a keyboard. And sometimes people will talk to me like that because by proxy, I am on stage with these people. I am involved in the conversation with these people. I am having a podcast, but it's one of those things where, look, I'm just trying to do my best just like you guys are. And when people, the constructive criticism I talked about that I get from my wife sometimes, when I get it from listeners, I appreciate it just as much. And I get sometimes really sincere emails that be 4 paragraphs long explaining to me why something one of us said or a guest said, was kind of insulting to them, or they felt was inappropriate, or they felt slighted that we didn't bring something up to a guest, or even the fact that we had a guest on, they felt was disrespectful. And if they write it in a way where I'm just like, wow, thank you for giving me that point of view, I didn't think of that, I will process it and I will go forward, maybe taking that into account, depending on what they're saying. But the nastiness on Twitter sometimes, and specifically Twitter, a lot of Reddit, not as much on Facebook, but so you get it from all angles. It really does. Unfortunately, it still gets to me, and that's because, look, I'm still relatively new at getting this amount of flack. I try to make myself feel better about it by saying, you're casting a wide net if you're also reaching people who don't like you. I did a podcast about 10 years ago. That's how me and Derrick first connected, called A Shot of Yager, that almost no one listened to. And I had pretty big name guests on it, but I just didn't have a platform. I didn't have the reach. I didn't have a celebrity co-host. And so the reason now looking back on it, I really knew not a lot of people were listening, is that I only got like a handful of like nice praise stuff about it. I never almost got any backlash on it. And that's because it wasn't reaching anybody who was predisposed to not liking it. Now you have people who are predisposed to not liking what we do or what we say. They've already decided they don't like me. They don't like Derrick. They don't even listen to the podcast. But something I say on Twitter or maybe an ad for the podcast might pop up on their feed, and they want to let me hear it. And look, I've only been doing this for 2 years. It still does get to me. It is still hard for me to just ignore or click mute or whatever. Derrick's such a veteran at this point. He goes, dude, why do you let him get to you, man? I just ignore all of it. And I really can't, because like I said, I try to read all of it because I don't want to let that legitimate constructive criticism fall through the cracks. I don't want anyone who's saying something nice to feel like they were ignored. But in turn, yes, I do get frustrated by people mispurposing things we say or trying to kind of typecast us as things we aren't and this and that. And, a lot of labeling.
Like you said, you just gotta, like Derrick said, you just gotta be like, look, this person's coming at me. They've probably got something bad going on in their own personal life, and they just want to, word vomit all over everyone around them. And it's a kind of a scary time, not just now, but I start thinking about, hey, how's that going to manifest itself over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Because our kids are going to be growing up in a very, very strange world. I kind of think like the world's going to look completely different in 20 years. We're going to have personal avatars walking around and virtual reality and in flying cars. So when we talk about like the future and our kids growing up, Scott, I'm curious, what's like one key characteristic that you really want to instill in your child? What's a really important characteristic that you want them to have?
It's something that you said, it's I think, when you said that, when someone's writing something to you, maybe they have something going on in their life. And it's kind of like, being nice to everybody at all costs, even if it's someone who's not being so nice to you, kind of thinking about why that might be, whether it is something you said or you did, or whether it's something you can't even fathom, something going on at home. That doesn't make what they're doing right. But that doesn't mean you have to kind of match that level of vitriol, or you gotta, it's one of those things where it's like, what's the saying about how, an eye for an eye? I think that's kind of going out the window, and I think the new sense of it needs to be, hey, an eye for just know that, yeah, they gave you that eye. Maybe just let them have that. You don't need to give them the eye back, and just kind of take solace in the fact that, you were the bigger person, or maybe maybe you use it as an olive branch, which I've seen. I mean, how viral do those stories go when like someone starts, I think Patton Oswalt had something recently where, someone really comes at them, but they use it as like a moment where they kind of like, instead of being mean, I remember this one guy was like really mean to Patton Oswalt, and instead he like donated to his, so what I think he had some sort of a GoFundMe or something, and he paid the whole thing, whatever. And these things go viral because they're so inspiring, because it's like, everyone kind of does have something really that indirectly is leading to why they're being mean or kind of, bullying and whatnot. The cancel culture that we're in right now, I think, is going to have sort of goods and bads in the future. I think we're nipping a lot of stuff in the bud now that, like, 10 years from now, even now, it feels unfathomable. You go and watch a movie from even 10 years ago. Go and watch The Hangover. Go and watch Wedding Crashers. Go and watch Old School. These are movies that I loved, and I still love and think they're funny. But just some of the word usage in it, some of the circumstance in it, that even by 2020 standards, seems like, wow, if this movie came out today, the headline would be, first scene, Luke Wilson gets in a cab and someone drops an F-bomb. Not the normal F-bomb, the other one. And Marriage Story, and not Marriage Story, and Hangover, the married guy is getting picked up, and Bradley Cooper says paging Dr. F word, and the headline will be Bradley Cooper calls so-and-so this. And it's like, just even going back 10 years, watch a movie from the 80s, they'll have the main character like hit a woman in the first scene, and they're the good guy, and they'll just gloss over it. And so we're advancing so much so quickly that I think a lot of stuff is getting thrown out, and our kids won't even know a world where it was acceptable to do a lot of this stuff, which is awesome and great. I think in the process, I think we are kind of jumping on certain people a little too quickly. We are starting to like militarize and weaponize the idea of being offended. I think sometimes it's instead of like, hey, let's learn from this, or can the person learn from this? It's let's use this to get them. I think that's the problem. I think these things should be used situationally to kind of move forward. And I think, to be honest with you, I know you said you have a 3-year-old and also a child as old as my kid. I think by the time they are old enough to even be using phones and social media and stuff like that, a lot of this stuff will be for the better. And I do think we will have a refractory period where people aren't as quick to get people, because I think we all will have course corrected to the point where it won't be happening so much. And so I
I should
think now
hope
we're
so.
at this
That
period.
pendulum can swing like
Yeah,
in
we're
very
going
wide
too
swaths,
far
though.
this
So
way. And that's
yeah,
why, there's a lot of signs of that. And that's why both bases, whether you're going political and you're going the color of the party you follow, or whether you're just going someone who, gets brutally offended by everything and wants to kind of, stick it to everyone who makes mistakes, and the people who go the other way and wants to stick it to anyone who gets offended and thinks no one should ever be offended. It's neither of those things. Like, it's in the middle. And I think what's happening is both of these sides are swinging, as you said. And by the time our kids are there, I think hopefully we're a better place for it.
one of the things that I've always thought about, hey, what's the most important characteristic I'd like my kid to have? It was confidence. Confidence was kind of the thing that I was always a big proponent of. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Mike Garofalo from the NFL Network, and he's got a similarly young child, and he was all about resiliency. And based on what we're talking about in the cancel culture and the need to be angry, the need to be offended, I think people wake up just being like, all right, what am I going to be ticked off about today? Which celebrity am I just going to tarnish and slander on social media? I think that resiliency and that ability to just let it bounce off is going to be really, really crucial in the coming years. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I
Scott,
think both of those things are really important. I think even right now, the definition of both those words is kind of different than it was in the past. I think confidence, which, like, I agree. I want my son to be confident, but I don't want him to have arrogance, which I think used to be what you kind of look at confidence as. Oh, look at that guy peacocking. He's super confident. He has no trouble talking to the ladies or the guys or whatever. He's the leader of the group. I think confidence now is having the confidence to not really care how you're coming off, to not really care who you're friends with or who you're sitting with, or if you like something that maybe the other people that you like don't like as much. I've gone through times in my life where if I like something, but I got the feeling not that many people around me liked it. Okay, maybe I don't like it as much. Now, I don't care. I go to concerts by myself. I go to wrestling events by myself. I will wear something if I think it's cool, no matter what anyone else thinks. Look, if I see a movie and a lot of people don't like it, chances are if a movie's really getting dragged, I'm not going to like it either. But if I like it, I'm still going to stomp for it. It doesn't matter. But there are times in my life where I've fallen victim to kind of going with the grain. I think that the confidence used to be perceived as the guy who just magic, or the gal who just magically like all the cool things.
the
No,
captain of the football
now,
team type of
right,
thing. Yeah.
exactly. Now it's, confidence. The kicker can be confident too.
Right.
Or, the guy who handles the stats, or the guy who just goes to the game, or the guy who doesn't even like football. You can be confident in the fact that football's not for you. Maybe it's too violent. The resiliency thing is, what you talked about is kind of like not letting that stuff affect you. I think it's one of those things where with resiliency, particularly in this time where people are constantly telling you what you're saying and doing wrong, the resiliency now, I think, is not like not letting it affect you, but letting it affect you in the sense that, sometimes it's hard to take criticism, especially when it comes in the form of an insult or someone trying to bring you down or cancel you or ruin your job or whatever it is. But to learn from it and to not let it like truly affect you from like a depression standpoint, you can let something affect you in the sense that, going forward, I'm going to try not to do that anymore. I'm going to be more cognizant of talking to people this way, or, hey, maybe I do come off that way, and also not letting it affect you. I think sometimes you can only do one or the other. And resiliency used to be like the tub thumping Chumbawamba. I get knocked down, but I get up again. But I think the new form of resiliency is sort of, I got knocked down. Why did I get knocked down? Did I trip? Is my footwork bad? Am I not looking around? Okay, I get back up again, and maybe next time I don't fall as easily. I think that is sort of the evolved version of resiliency that back in the day we just chalked up to, oh man, that guy can take a licking.
And probably one of the most important things that dads in a family structure can accomplish, because when they go to school and they're being harassed, and then they go home and someone doesn't like their Twitter or their TikTok video, well, they know that dad's going to give them attention. Mom's going to make sure that they're fed and in bed in time. And I think that having that family structure where they know that, well, at least I got these two people that love me and are paying attention to me can really help to instill those values. Because you're right, resiliency and confidence, if everything is being kind of like rewritten right now. It's kind of a weird period in time in a lot of ways. Scott, before I get into the rapid fire portion of the show, where can everyone find you if they love what you're saying, they want to know more about Challenge Mania?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is Twitter. I'm a verbal medium. I'm not a visual medium, although I do have an Instagram. On Twitter, I'm at Shot of Yager. That's Yager. On Instagram, I'm at Scott of Yager, just Scott of Yager, Yager. If you do like the challenge and you want to look at Challenge Mania specifically, we have a great Facebook page, facebook.com/Challenge Mania podcast. We have a Patreon as well, which is sort of a very tight-knit community of subscribers where we do a lot of contests and stuff. And we do a bonus podcast over there as well, patreon.com/Challenge Mania. Challenge Mania can be found anywhere you get your podcast. So if you listen on iHeartRadio, Google, Spotify, of course, the Apple Podcast app as well, just look up Challenge Mania. You'll find our logo. Click on that, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, we do live shows as well. You can get all that info at challengemania.live. And I think that about covers it if you're into that sort of stuff. But and also, if you do follow me on Instagram, I will say, even if you don't like the challenge, you do get the occasional, and by that I mean almost daily, cute picture of my son. So that's one of the reasons to maybe follow me on there. Although I'm not as funny on Instagram as I am on Twitter.
There you go. Respect. And I really respect a lot of what y'all do on your Patreon page, because I can tell you that you're very engaging, a lot of exclusive content. I think it's really smart and a really solid way to engage with your community. Okay. Rapid fire questions here, Scott. What is your favorite city to visit?
Oh, wow. Okay. So favorite city to visit, we just got back from one, Nashville, really great town. I had my bachelor party there, and then we just went back for Challenge Mania Live. Super fun, super great energy, great people, great food. Miami is like my home away from home, which is where I saw you. And I just, exactly. My wife is from there. So we got married there. Oh, cool. We go there at least once a year, if not sometimes 2-3 times a year. I've been there a dozen times. So I love Miami. I like Los Angeles as well. I mean, obviously, it's a different, I've lived there quite a few times, so I can speak to it more than most cities. I live in New York City. I grew up in Connecticut, so I love Stamford, Connecticut. I love New York City, obviously. Chicago's a great town, specifically for Challenge Mania, but just the people there just really like to get behind things. I mean, even if you're going there for like a game or a wrestling event or a concert or stuff like that, it's just a great market. I like Austin, Texas, although that was probably one of our most poorly attended shows, but I love going to Austin. I've been there a few times. We have some in-laws there. Denver, really fun place to check out. I don't want to slight any cities because I like almost every.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're giving a lot of shout outs to a lot of cities. You get a lot of shot of Jaegers.
I used to, when I did production, I would travel a lot too. So I lived in New Orleans for 6 weeks. I went to Portland a few times, great town, San Francisco. So I feel bad. I don't want somebody watching this and saying like, hey, you didn't shout out Portland. So, but I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it there.
That's all good. What's your favorite book or story?
Wow. Book or story. Wow. So, okay. Unfortunately, I'm like really ashamed at like how few books I've read in my life. When I was a kid, my parents used to kind of force, but both my parents were authors, so it's kind of ironic. But books were always kind of like, oh, sound sustained reading in school and reading time, and you kind of as a kid subconsciously look at it as like a punishment or something. So I was always more like a movie guy and whatnot. But I have read quite a few books. Recently, as an exercise before we got married, I read the entire Harry Potter series in about 4 months. I love those. But of course, I read them in adulthood, not when most people read them. I loved Ready Player One, actually. I'll shout out that book. That was a really great book that I read recently. It recently got turned into a movie, but the book itself by Ernest Cline is a real good one. A lot of odes to pop culture. And I'll never forget the first times I read the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. I just remember being completely enthralled. I would read them on commutes back and forth from Connecticut to New York, and those are great books too. So I'll go with those.
Good deal. Scott, pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
I don't mind it, but I'm a weird food guy as well. Like, I love when Thanksgiving, you can put everything on the plate. You're getting a couple bites where you got the cranberry and the casserole and everything together. So I'm weird like that. I won't necessarily order it all together, but when stuff's weird, I'll try the fruit with the this and the salty and the savory. So you give me a Hawaiian pizza, I'm going to eat it. I'm not grossed out by it. I don't know why this has become such a divisive thing, But yeah, so I'd sound like probably what I'm ordering at the pizza shop, but I don't hate it.
My daughter's been on strike for pizza for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know. There's something going on there. I don't know.
Oh,
no. So another question here on the challenge. What is your favorite elimination? What's your favorite elimination on the challenge?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Well, recently, everyone talks about Derrick and Joss, which I think was really cool. Mm-hmm. Recently, Derrick had this great one with Cyrus back in the day that I really remember. That was cool. Again, part of that like Derrick legacy of being able to beat the bigger guys and some of these things where you would think he has no chance. Derrick and Wes, although Derrick lost, I remember, was really great. People always point to the Johnny Bananas backpack situation with CT carrying Johnny like a helpless backpack when he came in as a mercenary.
Yeah.
Those are some iconic moments, but I'll shout out those, I think. I'll leave it there.
Good deal. And I mean, for me, I think that just Jordan just going through and just crushing everyone this last season was, I don't know how he does it, man. That kid's got some serious heart. Okay. Final question here for you, Scott. If you had a billboard that could reach millions and millions and millions of people, what are you gonna put on your billboard?
Wow, that's interesting. It's funny because I guess social media, sort of like your kind of like Twitter cover photo, is kind of like that. It's reaching far less than 1 million people. But if I had a billboard that could, now, do you want like a message that I could kind of give to 1 million people, or is it more like, what do I want them to be able to see that I'm putting out, kind of thing? I mean, I don't know.
Hey, it's your party, Scott. You've got this billboard that's going to reach everyone in the world. What would that message be? What are you going to put on?
Well, to be honest, self-servingly, it would be like, hey, do you love the challenge? If you do, you should be listening to Challenge Mania. Here's all our info. Because I think all the time, and it's funny, you mentioned the Patreon. And the Patreon, we put so much time and effort into because that literally is 90% of our business at this point. And those subscribers keep the lights on. And people always wonder, like, a lot of people get annoyed. They're like, hey, podcasts are supposed to be free. And that's fine if you're like a podcast as part of a larger conglomerate, like a Ringer or something like that. But, we're 2 guys trying to raise families and having to support our families. So to be honest with you, we do have sponsors for the regular episodes, but that's not enough to keep us from having to get regular jobs. When you have regular jobs, it's hard to be out there doing the podcast, doing the live shows and stuff like that. So the thing with our show is that 1 million people watch the challenge every week. And, of those 1 million people, we get, about 30,000 downloads an episode, but I don't even think 100,000 of those 1 million people actually know that Challenge Mania exists. So to be honest with you, self-servingly, I might put like an inspirational quote at the bottom as well to kind of try to instill goodness among the 1 million people I'm reaching. But I just want the people who watch the challenge to at least know about our product, know about the shows we're doing. Every time we do a Challenge Mania Live, someone posts the photo album online, and I see people, oh my God, they were in Nashville. How did I not know about this? So no matter how many times I post about it or Derrick posts about it or what have you, it's only going out to our followers who probably already know about it. So if I could somehow reach, 10 million people, and in turn, maybe those 1 million challenge fans we haven't reached yet, unfortunately, I'd have to take, I know like St. Jude's Hospital or something could probably use that space too, but I'd have to, at least for a week, use it to plug Challenge Mania, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't hate on that. And like you said, in order to produce a quality show, you need to have source of revenue, and not to slight the show itself. You don't have to be a Patreon to appreciate what Scott and Derrick are doing at Challenge Mania Podcast. There is a lot of really great free content. You can just take it a step further and get exceptional content and extras by heading up that Patreon. So
yeah, if you think Brock is cute and you want him to have more cute clothes, become a patron. But no, I mean, if you think he's already well groomed and everything like that, we do put out. I mean, we're going to keep doing the free podcast too, because we do want to make sure that you guys are still getting those quality interviews of Challenge cast members, and we do obviously also see the value of reaching people who are listening for free and having that larger audience. The free audience is always going to be the larger one. And hey, I'm a podcast fan too, and most of my favorite podcasts are free, so I totally get that. So we're going to keep that going also. But yeah, it's just it's part of the gig. It's one of those things where people kind of hate on the fact that we charge for some of this stuff. I'm like, would someone come to your job, like if you managed a sports shop and be like, hey, you know what, these fishing rods should be free, what are you doing?
Yeah. If you're providing value and people are willing to pay for it, I'm all for it. Really appreciate you coming on the show, Scott. You brought a lot of great insight. Love what you're doing with Challenge Mania, and really looking forward to watching your story evolve here over the years, brother. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And this is really cool too. I think, it's funny. It's a through line where it's like, you find people who are dads, but they're from all walks of life and they have other different success stories and whatnot. So I think it's really cool what you're doing, and keep it up. This was a fun conversation. Anytime you want to do it again, let me know.